Okay, ladies, here we are in Exodus 32. So before I go over this little section, I want to first just remind you, we talked about earlier how God had some other ways where he had designated them to be a example of his presence to his people. The first one was the tent of meeting, also called the tabernacle. It was first called the tent of meeting because the tabernacle hadn't been built just yet. It was actually a tent, and Moses would go into the tent, and the pillar of cloud, the pillar of fire would be there to signify God was dwelling with Moses. Now, the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, we'll talk about that at a later time. That's called a theophany, which is a little bit different than what I want to share with you today as far as God's presence. There's something specific I want to show you in chapter 32 that will clarify what I mean by that. So anyway, the tent of meeting was where the people saw Moses interact with God personally. The other thing, which we'll see later on, is the shining face of Moses, which a lot of times is just talked about as being a bright glare that the people couldn't look at because it overwhelmed them, which is true. But the shining face of Moses was also something to show the people the glory of the old covenant in Moses, or through Moses, I should say, and the glory of the Lord shining from him. So it gave confidence to the people that he was actually appointed by God, and that the covenant that he had made with his people was a covenant they could trust in. So let's look really quickly here at Exodus 32. It says in the first verse, when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people gathered themselves together to Aaron and said to him, "Up, make us a god who shall go before us. And as for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him." You see how it says there, "Up, make us gods who shall go before us"? They wanted something physical. They wanted something tangible. And so, yes, we know the story is often talked to us about as being idolatry. This is a moment of idolatry. This is, an example of what we shouldn't do. We shouldn't be making any gods before the one true God, which is the second commandment. We know that. But it's more than just don't bow before an idol. The people were looking for something to represent God's presence. And Aaron foolishly allowed the people to sway him instead of helping them build confidence in the fact that God had called Moses. So this was a direct example of really what we do as Christians. When we get discouraged, when we don't see God in our lives, we may not take an image to go bow before it, but we're going to look for another way to observe God's presence. And that can cause us to feel discouraged. That can cause us to feel that God is not near. And that's really what we want to be careful of, because anytime we pull away from what God has said is his presence in our lives, it can be a way to be not only deceived, but for the enemy to come in and destroy what God has already built up into us. Now, we know that Satan is not able to overpower God. He's not another God. He doesn't have ability to see into our thoughts and read our minds, but he is the God of this world, 2 Corinthians says, and he is looking to distract us through this world system. It says directly that he has blinded the minds of people. So we really want to think very, very thoughtfully about this and discern where our heart is when it comes to the physical presence of God. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to get you over to Exodus 34, where God then reinstates the covenant to the people.